Hey, I'm Kev, and welcome to Power Oversteer. It's for the first time since the 2013 season. I'm doing previews and reviews for every round of the Verizon IndyCar Series season. And about a week and a half ago, the 2016 season kicked off around some beautiful streets in Florida with the Firestone Grand Prix of St. Petersburg for the season opener. It was. We had some great battling at the front of the field, some fantastic jostling in the midfield, and a couple of incidents to talk about as well. And let me tell you about them now with the weekend recap. The 2016 season started off with a bang in first practice as Penske's willpower ended up in the wall before turn 10. The 2014 champion was adjusting the brake bias in the kink on the straight when he realised too late he hadn't turned enough to negotiate it. A big repair job followed for the number 12 crew, but Power was soon on the pace in qualifying, breaking the track record in the second part with a minute .02 before grabbing pole with a minute .2450. Unfortunately, the Australian was suffering with symptoms such as dizziness, headaches, nausea and neck stiffness that had got the best of him on Saturday, so he could barely get out of his car after the blitz of qualifying and was too sick for the post-session press conference. It was amazing he was driving at all, but he wasn't able to drive in the race on Sunday after failing the SCAT, Sports Concussion Assessment Test, the IndyCar Series method for determining concussion-like symptoms. Although the symptoms were similar to a concussion, Power hadn't actually suffered one. Instead, he had suffered from an inner ear infection for the few weeks before St. Pete and had worsened over the weekend despite receiving treatment for it. The Penske driver had recovered by this past Tuesday to be back in the car to test round Barber and is ready for the next round in Phoenix. In his place for the St. Pete race was the series' new super sub, Oil Serbia. The Spaniard had to start from the back of the grid due to not qualifying the number 12 car. Up stepped Simon Pagenaud in the number 1 position for the race, with Harry Kashnevis making it a Penske front row. The title rivals of last year, Juan Pablo Montoya and Scott Dixon, occupied the second row with an all-Honda-powered third row featuring Ryan Hunter-Reay and Graham Rahal. Behind them was Bourdais in 7th, Hinch in 8th on his return, and the AJ Foyt pair of Hawksworth and Sato rounded out the top 10. It was a disappointing qualifying for Marco Andretti in 14th, and shocking for Tony Kanaan down in 19th, with his Chip Ganassi teammate Max Chilton, the best rookie, starting in 16th. On the Sunday, we had a classic IndyCar street race. While pace was a factor, getting the strategy right, avoiding trouble, and taking advantage at starts and restarts were the main factors to catapult a driver to a good finish. We saw some of these elements from the start. While Pagenaud held on at the front, it got a bit messy behind. Joseph Newgarden started 11th but was looking to make moves into the first corner. However, he outbraked himself and went into the back of James Hinchcliffe, who suffered a puncture and would fall a lap down after a delay in the turn 10 runoff on his way back to the pits. Newgarden also pitted at the end of the first lap for a new front wing, but the A-come-to racing driver would suffer from electrical issues affecting the engine, necessitating numerous pit stops before becoming the first retirement on lap 47. A disappointing start to an important season for the American. Hinchcliffe wasn't the only driver to suffer a punch on the first lap. Takuma Sato got an unwelcome bump from behind in turn 4, which meant he picked up a flat tyre and had to pit at the end of the lap. On the other side of the coin, Marco Andretti had made the best start, gaining 7 places, which meant he laid in 7th at the end of the first lap. The race settled into a rhythm in the first half with the occasional move. Harry Kashnevis had kept second at the start, but struggled to look after his tyres in the first stint. This was evident with locking up into the last corner becoming a regular feature. Montoya slipped by in turn 1 on lap 11. Dixon followed the next lap whilst in the pack behind, and Andretti got past Rahal for 6th at the same time. Hunter-Reay was the next past the Penske veteran on lap 14, Andretti on lap 18 and Rahal in the last corner on lap 20. Once Rahal was past, Kashnevis immediately headed for the pits, chopping across Bourdais, but only received a warning for improper pit entrance. This wasn't the only chop we would see. Hunter-Reay, fresh out of the pits, was battling with Luca Filippi, who had been put on an alternative strategy by Dale Coyne. Towards turn 10, Filippi got a run, but Hunter-Reay tried to block, slightly damaging the right side of the Italian's front wing. I guess actually causing damage with a chop wants nothing. For the rest of the stint, Filippi would hold on to 5th place, although a queue formed behind him. Amazingly, at this time, Dale Coyne had both cars in the top 5, with Connor Daly also on an alternative strategy, having a belter in 4th. That would last until lap 46, when Hunter-Reay finally got past Filippi in turn 1, and with the door open, Marco Andretti tried to force a move into an always closing gap. The American predictably went into the side of Felipe's car and spun round, bringing out the first caution of the race. Marco would suffer further misery on that 53 when he stopped in the last corner, delaying the restart until that 57 when hell broke loose. In turn 1 we saw some dives, but it was in turn 4 when almost half the field got caught up in an incident. Up front, Hunter-Reay and Tony Kanaan were side by side, with the rookie holding off the most experienced driver in the field. Unfortunately, behind them, we saw Helio Castroneves dive down the inside of Hunter-Reay and into the back of Dixon. Fortunately, it didn't result in anything apart from the Kiwi going slightly sideways, staying ahead of the Brazilian. Unfortunately, Carlos Munoz missed his braking zone, rear-ending Graham Rahal, which trapped the rest of the field behind the pair. Oyo Serbia had a superb pit stop in the previous round of stops, gaining 3 positions, which moved him into 11th, and the first attendee of the spinning Rahal. Him, along with the likes of Hawksworth, Kimball, Rossi, Hinchcliffe and Bourdais, all had to pit to repair their damage. The race resumed on lap 63, with Montoya getting past Daly in turn 1, like he did on Pagenaud on the previous restart, but this time for the lead, and he promptly built a stable gap. For Daly, the cautions had moved this strategy in line with everyone else's, and the American was impressively keeping up the pace in second until his last stop on lap 80. At least it would have been his last stop if Munoz didn't strike again. In turn 4, with Daly lapping Hinchcliffe, Munoz made it 3 wide on the outside and turned down into the pair. The Del Coin car suffered front wing damage, which then got into the side pods, causing overheating, leading the rookie to pit a few laps later and rowing a superb drive from the 24-year-old. Surely it won't be the last time we see Daly up there this season. Meanwhile, in the end, Montoya and Pagenaud cruised to a 1-2 Penske finish for the second year in a row at St. Pete. The Colombian grabbed his 15th career victory, moving him level with the legend Alex Zanardi for 31st on the all-time list. Helio Castroneves looked like making it an all-Penske podium, but once again struggled managing his tyres, meaning he had to try to hold off Ryan Hunter-Reay and the rapid Russian Mikhail Leshkin in the last few laps. Hunter-Reay got past in turn 4 on lap 108 to grab a well-deserved podium for Andretti Autosport and Honda. However, Leshkin had to settle for 5th behind Castroneves, but what a result for someone who didn't have much running in the car in pre-season testing. After being stuck at the back for the first half of the race, Takuma Sato really benefited from the cautions and ended up in a lonely but solid 6th after an eventful day. Scott Dixon had 30 with a podium for most of the race, but an early last stop on that 70 due to debris in the side pods causing overheating cost him a bucket of time, but he recovered to 7th with some nice moves, such as on Munoz in turn 10 on lap 102. Munoz finished behind Dixon after his day of torment, despite receiving a stop-and-go penalty on lap 64 for punting Rahal. Tony Kanaan had a difficult day from the start as he struggled braking, leading to an extremely early stop on lap 7. The car seemed to get better with the adjustments in the stops, but he did suffer a couple more hiccups on his way to 9th. On the lap 64 restart, he made a typical TK restart, getting past Chilton before making an aggressive move in turn 1. He squeezed past Pignot, which forced the American into Filippi, which meant the pair had to pit at the end of the lap due to damage, ending their promising races. Kanaan continued in the top 10 but suffered from the same overheating problem as all the other Chip Ganassi cars, leading to a slower last stop. He forced his way back into the top 10 on lap 104 with a tidy pass on Rossi before moving up to 9th on the last lap. This was due to Charlie Kimball spinning in the first corner as he suffered from brake issues, meaning he ended his race in the tyres and 10th, last of the lead lap finishers. In 11th was Jack Hawksworth after he got caught up in the incident on lap 57, then on lap 64 got a drive-through penalty for entering a closed pit, ending his chances of getting a top 10 finish. Best of the rookies was Alexander Rossi in 12th for Andretti Autosport and Brian Herter after he got passed late by Hawksworth in turn 1. The American showed that he had some adjusting to do as he could have got a top 10 if he wasn't so slow on cold tyres after his final stop. Conor Daly ended up in 13th ahead of fellow rookie in the hard luck story, Spencer Piggott. It was disappointing days for Andretti and Rahal, with the last of the rookies, Max Chilton, ending up in 17th despite showing some great avoidance in the lap 57 pile-up as he went down the escape road instead of getting caught up. Oyo Serbia, James Hinchcliffe and Luca Filippi round up the finishers, as Sebastian Bourdais retired on lap 87 due to damage received from earlier contact. It was a good start to the year for IndyCar and is hopefully a sign of things to come for the season ahead. That was a rather action-packed weekend, wasn't it? Now we move on to doing some rating. Back in 2013 I did drive the race, move of the race, and had a winners and losers section. This time around I'm going with a green flag, yellow caution flag and red flag system. Firstly, the green flag goes to a team, driver, company, maybe even the stewards who did well during the whole weekend, and in particular during the race. So for the St. Pete weekend there were a few candidates. Penske winning with another 1-2 on the streets of Florida, along with an insanely under the weather Will Power grabbing pole while setting a new track record along the way. Del Coyne for superb strategy which enabled their drivers to challenge for top 10 positions until it became pear-shaped. But I'm giving the green flag to MacLeod of Smith Peterson Motorsports and Takuma Sato of AJ Foyt Racing. For Olsen, this is a guy who missed pre-season testing due to visa issues. He had Gabby Chavez step into his seat in Phoenix, so heading to St. Pete, he was very much unfamiliar with the car. That showed in practice. He was all over the place. I think he went off into the runoff like 4 or 5 times, in particular at turn 4. In that braking zone he really did struggle, and that struggle continued in qualifying when he ended up down in 17th, leaving himself lots to do for the race, but what a fantastic job he did in the race. During the first half of the race he was still down there in the massive midfield pack. Then on lap 56 he got moved to the back of the field along with Luca Filippi for entering a closed pit lane. But fortunately for them, on that 57, we had the incident of the race. Olsen was caught up in that, but he quickly got out with perhaps the move of the race as he gained like 7 positions, catapulting himself into the top 10. Then in the second half of the race, he had fantastic pace, particularly in that final stint, where due to misfortune and issues to the likes of Scott Dixon and Connor Daly, he found himself in a top 5 position, and along with Ryan Hunter-Reay, he was catching Hellcat Evans for a podium. Unfortunately for him, while Hunter-Reay got past the Brazilian, Olsen couldn't quite make the move. However, in the end, he ended up less than a second off a podium and less than 10 seconds off the win in his return race to a full-time seat in IndyCar. What a fantastic performance from the Russian. It was a great performance to carry on in the second half of that race after the setback and being very fortunate, but it's the pace and consistency that really impressed me. As I said, this was a guy that really struggled in practice and qualified, but got it together in the race. This is a guy that came back at the end of 2015 at Sonoma and was right on the pace with Smith Peterson Motorsports. He was perhaps their best driver on his comeback weekend by getting a top 10 finish. But next up is Felix, and the last time he was on an oval in an IndyCar was at Fontana at the end of his rookie year. In practice, he had an horrendous accident with Charlie Kimball. He went up into the catch fencing, got some bad injuries from that, but recovered well over that off-season. Unfortunately, he couldn't get a seat for 2015 due to a number of issues, including political, so he went over to the European Le Mans Series. But in his rookie season, he was known for his adaptability and aggressiveness on the ovals. It was really impressive from him. Will that still be there at Felix? We have to wait and see. Now for Takuma Sato, a guy who in practice along with his teammate Jack Hawksworth showed fantastic pace, but in qualifying they were quite disappointing being on the edge of the top 10. Then he got more disappointing on the first lap of the race as he got cleared from behind by I think Max Chilton, leading to a flat tyre, an early pit stop and being right at the back of the field. He was stuck there for quite a while until the first caution enabled him to catch up to the pack. Then he made an aggressive move on the next restart, getting past Hawksworth, which proved crucial in turn 4 as he managed to sliver by the carnage while his teammate got caught up in it. He pitted in the caution and emerged around the top 10, then thanks to the misfortunes and issues that befell drivers ahead, like Dixon and Daly, he moved up to quite a lonely 6th in the end. Just like Olsen, it was a fantastic recovery drive. Street circuits really are his forte. Well, he's also good on the road courses, of course, with his background as a British F3 champion, then F1. He really has taken to the streets, though. He's been great at St. Pete in the past. He qualified in the top 6 last year, although the race didn't turn out his way. This year, it did, though. I'm looking forward to what Sato and AJ Foyt Racing can do this season. Hopefully they can be a bit more consistent and bring a whole season together, which has been Sato's main struggle in IndyCar. It was in F1 as well. So what a great start to the season for Sato and Olsen. On to the yellow caution flag, which means that a team, driver, company or steward could have done badly or done well at a particular weekend, but we got to go, whoa, calm down a bit. For St. Pete, you could nick to Graham Rahal, Mark Andretti, or Sebastian Bourdais for doing badly, and maybe even Connor Daly for doing well with Dale Coyne to get it. But the yellow caution flag goes to Honda. This past off-season, Honda are able to use Rule 9.3 in the rulebook, which allowed them to develop their road, street course and short oval aero kit more than Chevrolet. So hopefully that means they can catch up and enable in some parity between the aero kits this year, as last season, the Honda aero kit was a bit behind the Chevrolet one. But this rule doesn't extend to the Super Speedway aero kit, as IndyCar found it to be quite level with Chevrolets, and last year at the Indy 500, Fontana and Pocono, it certainly looked like it with Honda winning 2 of those 3 races. On the road, street course and short oval aero kit, IndyCar found 3 deficient areas. The front wing area with its overly complicated and cheese grater front wing, the side pod area, and the rear of the car, which altogether led to a draggy and oversteery aero kit. Graham Rahal was the only Honda driver to really get the maximum out of it throughout last year. For this year, Honda have moved development of its aero kits in-house, moving it away from Nick Wirt's design company who did last year's aero kit. Wirt will still be helping with the Super Speedway kit though. With the help of Rule 9.3, Honda have fixed those deficient areas. The front wing looks simpler, a bit like Chevrolet's. The side pods have more of a Coke bottle shape. It looks a bit more like Chevrolet's. And the rear of the car, it seems like the airflow to the rear diffuser is better, with Chevrolets looking more like Hondas. Therefore you wonder why these two companies are designing 2 separate aero kits when they're looking very similar. Perhaps that's a question to answer at another time. Before St. Pete, the Honda kit looked much better in pre-season testing, and it showed in qualifying with a 5-5 split in the top 10, although this would be 6-4 to Chevrolet without Power's withdrawal, moving Oil Serbia to the back of the grid. In the race, it was 6-4 to Chevrolet's favour, but Honda did grab a podium with Ryan Hunter-Reay, a top 5 finish from MacLeod, sit through to Takuma Sato and 8th with Carlos Munoz. 11th to 16th, they were all Honda drivers with a split in the order after that. While it was a bit more even for Honda against Chevrolet in St. Pete, the reason why this is a yellow flag rather than a green flag is because we haven't seen this aero kit perform at the other types of tracks it's got to tackle. The next race in Phoenix is going to be a big test for both manufacturers, with it being a new venue for these aero kits. It's going to be hard and physical for the drivers and aero kits, with over 200 laps to endure. It will be interesting to see how it shapes up there, and at Barber Motorsports Park, the road course type this kit has to perform at as well. We also got to remember in this aero kit battle that Chevrolet have the 2 biggest teams in the series, Chip Ganassi Racing and Team Penske, while Honda has Andretti Autosport, then very good teams in Smith Peterson Motorsports and Ray Hordetman Langan Racing, who are just not as big and resourceful as the Big 3. It's just another aspect that makes it harder for Honda to beat Chevrolet, even with how competitive the IndyCar Series is. The last non-Big 3 title win was back in 2002 with Sam Hornish Jr. of Panther Racing, before all of the Big 3 teams moved over from kart the following season, and immediately won with Scott Dixon of Chip Ganassi Racing. Some things never change. Finally, on to the red flag, which means you done fucked up, son. As for the St. Pete weekend, I think this can only go to Carlos Munoz of Andretti Autosport. Yes, he finished 8th in the race, but the run to that result was very messy, instant field, and a number of drivers can feel aggrieved about his driving. Heading into 2016, I believe this is a season where Munoz has to perform after quite an anomalous 2015 year, which came after a very solid 2014 rookie campaign where he finished in the top 10 in the championship. He needs to show a bit of the fire and spectacular driving that he showed when he burst onto the IndyCar scene at the 2013 Indy 500, where he qualified second and finished second behind Tony Kanaan, and at the season finale that year in Fontana, where he's running the low line like no one else. And though he didn't finish, it was brilliant to watch. Therefore, driving really well, collecting the results, and getting a top 10 in the standings like in 2014 should be the aim this year. At St. Pete in practice, it looked like he and most of Andretti struggled to find the sweet spot in the setup, and that showed in qualifying where Ryan Hunter-Reay was the only Andretti driver to get out the first part of qualifying, with Munoz the next best, qualifying 13th but started in 12th. In the first half of the race, he hovered around that area, going long in the first stint and clinging on to a top 10 position by the time we come to lap 57. He unleashed hell on the rear of Graham Rahall's car in turn 4. I said earlier McLeod struggled there in practice, but Munoz went a step further, missing his braking point by a country mile and punted round the Rahal at a Menagan racing machine. Rahal firstly put his arms in the air like he didn't care about Munoz before he stopped spinning, even before Serbia went into the side of his car. Rahal even gave Munoz the double birds, the IndyCar signal, for that was his fault. Munoz didn't just ruin Rahal's race, there was also Jack Hawksworth, Charlie Gimbel, Sebastian Bourdais, Serbia, James Hinchcliffe, Alexander Rossi and Max Chilton. Another rookie showed great avoidance by going down the escape road rather than getting caught up in the mess of cars. But that wasn't the last incident and last driver's race that Munoz ruined. Coming out the pits for the last time, Connor Day was on his way to a probable top 5 finish for Dale Coyne Racing, a rare achievement for the team. However, Daly was passing Hinchcliffe in turn 4, but Munoz made it 3 wide and came down on both of them, damaging the Dale Coyne car's front wing, which then saw bits get into the side pods, causing overheating and forcing an extra stop for the team to fix the problem a few laps later. There you go, an eventful 8th place. It would have been fantastic to see more of his battle with Scott Dixon and Charlie Kimball heading on to the last lap, as they were very close and it ended with Kimball round at the first corner. For Munoz, it was a good result, but not the way to get it. It's the opposite of what Daly got, a superb drive but didn't get rewarded for that, while Munoz got rewarded for wrecking ball half the field with a top 10 finish. Hope to see him get more top 10 finishes down the road, but not in the bad, spectacular way. In the good way. There we go, IndyCar is back. I'm dancing in my streets, my underwear, excited about it. Figuratively, of course, but it wasn't just IndyCar that was back in St. Pete. It was also the Mazda Road to Indy, the feeder series to Verizon IndyCar Series, with its 3 championships. The US F2000, Pro Mazda, but we begin with the Indy Lights Championship, the last step before the Verizon IndyCar Series. And in St. Pete, it was a tale of 2 Felixes. If the St. Pete races highlighted anything, it's that the Indy Lights Championship looks as competitive as ever. 16 drivers spread across 6 evenly matched teams tackled the streets of Florida, up from 13 entries last year. The IL-15 celebrates its 2nd year as the series car, and we saw a 2nd-year driver, Kyle Kaiser of Junkers Racing, grab the first pole of the year. Reigning Euro F3 champion Felix Rosenqvist shared the front row in his debut race with Bilardi Auto Racing. However, the Swede selected the rain mode engine map, meaning he had less power down the straight, so he could only finish 7th. It was his teammate, Zach Veach, who was the star of the show. The American won at St. Pete in 2014 on his way to 3rd in the championship, but missed the whole of last season. Back in the series, he was in top form right from the start, as he grabbed the lead from Kaiser in turn 2. Felix Serra's moved to Carlin from Bilardi in the off-season and was the biggest mover at the start, climbing to 2nd from 7th on the grid. Scott Hargrove of Team Pelfrey, who are basically the 8-star motorsports team he ran with for a couple of rounds last year, leapfrogged to 3rd with Kaiser down to 4th, and reigning Pro Mazda champion Santi Duratala of Smith Peterson Motorsports rounded out the top 5 after a great start from 9th. Veach built a comfortable cushion at the front until that 17 when his car lost power exiting turn 3. He got going again in 4th place, but the electronic glitch would return a few more times before he retired from the race. Although he set the fastest lap, it was a sad end to a brilliant drive from the 21-year-old in his comeback race. Serrades inherited the lead and won comfortably by 5.5 seconds from Hargrove and Kaiser. Uratala held off teammate R.C. Anderson for 4th, with another Smith Peterson driver in 6th, former GP2 racer Andre Negrão. Behind the Brazilian, Rosenqvist, Britt Dean Stoneman of Andretti Autosport, Juan Pedrohita of Team Pelfrey, and Carlin's Ed Jones rounded out the top 10. A disappointing result for the Dubai-based Brit, who won both races in St. Pete last year in his and Carlin's debut in America. In the second race, it was Rosenqvist's turn to start from pole, and he never relinquished the lead during a flag-to-flag win. The only time he came under threat was just after the halfway mark, when he found it tough to lap a battling Uratala and Shelby Blackstock. After a nervous time where Kaiser ate the lead down to about a second, Uratala let the leaders and Blackstock through on the front straight around lap 30. The 24-year-old then built his lead up to 4 seconds by the finish from Kaiser and teammate Veach. He also set the fastest lap to make it a perfect victory. Serrades was a lonely 4th as he didn't have the pace in the longer 45 of that race. Negrão once again had a queue behind him as he battled hard to round out the top 5, while he failed to keep Serraldes behind him after the Puerto Rican pulled a great outside move in turn 4. The Smith-Peterson driver did keep Stoneman behind him to the finish. Ed Jones had a much better race, battling the ground, until on lap 36 he spun trying to make a move in turn 1. Rounding out the top 10 behind Jones was Pedrohita, the 4 Smith-Peterson driver Scott Anderson, and Andretti's Dalton Kellett, who was battling Pedrohita until he spun in the final corner in the second half of the race. Outside the top 10 were drivers that got caught up in incidents. On the first lap in turn 4, Blackstock spun Hargrove round with RC Anderson having nowhere else to go. With 3 laps to go, we saw Anderson become the victim of another incident while he was battling teammate Anderson for 9th. In turn 4, rookie Neil Alboreto braked himself, went over the back of Anderson. Fortunately, the car didn't go too far in the air and just went into the tyres, with the Carlin driver okay. The other timer was Junkers' Zachary Clayman de Mello, who ran impressively in 6th in the early going until an electrical problem halted him on lap 10. After all of that, Serraldes leads the championship on 49 points, with Kaiser a point behind and Rosenquist a further point back. Hargrove is 4th on 32 points, tied with Negrão. Veach is 6th on 29 points, 1 ahead of Stoneman, he's 1 ahead of Urotada, he's 1 ahead of teammate Henderson, he's 1 ahead of Jones and Pedrohita in 10th. In the team's championship, Belardi lead on 46 points, 4 ahead of Cardin. Junkers are 3rd on 35 points, 1 ahead of Smith-Peterson, with Pelfrey on 27, and Andretti last with 16 points. On to the Pro Mazda Championship, and in St. Pete, it was painted Pelfrey. Unfortunately, in the Mazda Road to Indy, there's always one championship that is struggling with car count. In recent years, it's been the Indy Lights, but this season it looks like the Pro Mazda Championship gets the dubious honour. With the withdrawal of Andretti Autosport, it looks like this could be an open door for Team Pelfrey to dominate the series. There are only 6 teams with 12 drivers in St. Pete, which includes Jay Horak with his M1 Racing as the only national class entry. The lower cost class running to SCCA rules and the older Star Mazda tech specs. Half the field were rookies, and we saw one of them being very impressive. And Tadez grabbed pole for the second race, led the most laps, and won in his debut weekend in the series. It was a hard battle though with teammate Pato O'Ward, as Tadez had to be consistently fast to edge out a lead of a couple of seconds that he held until the end. Riron Tan completed an all-Pelfrey podium with last year's US F2000 champion Nico Jamin and fellow rookie Jake Parsons rounding out the top 5. In the first race we saw 16-year-old O'Ward win from pole as he led the most laps and grabbed the fastest lap, just like he did in the second race. Tadez was behind, and Cape Motorsports with Rain Taylor Racing rookie Jake Edison rounded out the podium. Edison's teammate Jamin was 4th, and Tan rounded out the top 5. After the opening weekend, O'Ward leads the championship with 59 points from Tadez on 57. Tan is 3rd on 39 points, 1 ahead of Jamin and 3 ahead of Edison. Team Pelfrey lead the team's standings with a maximum 80 points, ahead of Cape Motorsports with Rain Taylor Racing on 50 points and Junkers Racing on 40. Finally, on to the USF 2000 Championship, and just like in Pro Mazda, it saw team domination, this time from Paps Racing. Boasting an impressive entry list of 26 drivers with 12 teams, the entry level of the Mazda Road to Indy should see lots of competition this season. However, St. Pete saw Paps Racing take over with Jordan Lloyd taking the pole in both races. The reigning Australian Formula 4 champion drove in St. Pete and Nola for John Comiskey Racing last year as a rookie and used the experience of the circuit impressively to win, then finish 2nd in the races. He wasn't alone at the front though. His teammate Lu Feng Lao mirrored him in both races, finishing 2nd, then grabbed the fastest lap on his way to just winning the 2nd race. They were joined on the podium in the first race by rookie Robert Menges, who held off Australians Luke Gammon and Anthony Martin in a tense race. For 21-year-old Martin, who was the top rookie last year, finishing 4th in the standings, it was a race full of battling through the field after dropping back early on. The Cape Motorsports with Rain Taylor Racing driver showed pace, matching the leaders as he set the fastest lap on his way to 5th. In the second race, Team Pelfrey's Jordan Kane grabbed a superb podium ahead of Cape Motorsports' Parker Thompson and Gabin. It was a complete turnaround from the first race for the 14-year-old, one of the youngest single-seater racers in the world. The Brit was involved in an incident on lap 6 when he collided with the 3rd Paps Racing driver, Garth Richards, ending both of their races. However, in the second race, he showed controlled aggression on his way from 10th on the grid to the podium in his debut weekend in the series. which has also had a turnaround in the second race, finishing just outside the top 5 in 6th. After the opening weekend, Lloyd leads the championship with 58 points, 2 ahead of Lau. The consistent Gabin is 3rd on 36 points, 1 ahead of Menges, who backed up his podium with 8th in the second race. Martin rounds out the top 5 after getting 10th in the second race, with the Canadian Thompson, his teammate Nikita Lastotkin, Arms Up Motorsports Victor Franzoni, Kane and John Comiskey Racing's Aya Agrarian competing the top 10. A national class was introduced to the US F2000 this year and follows the same principle of the Pro Mazda one, with lower entry costs and foreign rules set by the SCCA. There were 4 entrants in St. Pete, with Spencer Racing's Eric Filgaris topping the standings after finishing 14th and 17th in the races. Finally, the Teams Championship sees Paps Racing leading the way with a maximum 80 points. Incredibly, they already have more than double the points of second place Pelfrey, who have 37 points. K Motorsports are 3rd on 34 points, then it's J Motorsports on 28, and Arms Up Motorsports competes the top 5 with 14 points. We will next see Indy Lights supporting IndyCar at the beginning of April in Phoenix, while the Pro Mazda and US F2000 Championships will next be at the Mazda Road course at the end of April. I know it took longer than it should have done, but that is the St. Pete review finally finished. I really do apologise for it being about a week and a half late just in February, and this month it's been a bit harder to record things than normal, but hopefully from April onwards, things can go back to normal on this channel of me putting up about 1 or 2 videos per week. I'm aiming for more than that, of course, but hopefully more videos where I actually can talk in them. That's why you've got lots of Forza Horizon 2 recently, and that will continue into April. And of course, without a wheel, that kind of limits my options on recording, seeing specifically sim racing, which I unfortunately can't really do at this time. But I will be back next week for another Power Oversteer, as it's the Phoenix Grand Prix. I'm really looking forward to the return to the trioval for the Indy cars, and it's not just going to be a preview of Phoenix, as I didn't manage to get my season preview out in time, so I might roll the season preview into that Phoenix preview as well. So it's going to be a bit longer than normal for my previews. It's not going to be like 10 or 15 minutes. It's going to be more like half an hour to 45 minutes, that video. But I really do hope you have enjoyed this review of St. Pete. So out for watching, and I will see you next week.